Hi everybody, my name is Christopher Collison and we're going to finish up our videos for Chemistry 670, uh, Graduate Chemistry Writing and Communication with this final summary video. It's quite a long one, but we're going to tie everything together. The importance of storytelling, the importance of keeping a structure that is clear, concise and compelling, using problems to help us communicate that story. And then we're also going to think about how to deliver a breathtaking presentation, how to put together something that will bring about enthusiasm for your audience. So let's have a look at these points, and I encourage you all to try some of these ideas and look at other people's performances, look at other people's presentations and learn from them. So thanks again for listening. I hope you enjoy.
Well, continuing with our title of Clear, Concise and Compelling, let's provide a summary to everything we've learned so far and tie this all together in particular for a presentation. Once again, my name's Chris Collison and this is for Chemistry 670 at RIT. So I always think it's important to provide an outline. I've talked before about how to tell the audience what you're going to tell them, and then tell them again in a summary. So what's the outline for this presentation? Well, I'm going to remind you about how stories are powerful. We're going to think about again how to start with a solid structure and one that's going to help us describe the problem that will engage the audience. We'll talk a little bit about the story design and the presentation design, and then we'll go on to talk about the key features of our actual delivery of the story to that audience. So we know that stories attract attention. People remember movies like Star Wars. We know that they attract and they inspire and they motivate. People talk about these movies and they inspire us to go on and do big things because we follow the heroes in those stories. We follow the protagonists. We can somehow identify with the problem that these heroes are trying to solve. So these stories work for us. Stories always have a start and an end. They have a central theme, so they allow us to get our heads around that central idea, usually a problem to be solved, but also there's a journey there. And so if we want to get the ideas of the journey across to the audience, then a story is the best place to start. People often say to me, well, can science be a story? Why, if we're communicating science, do we need to turn it into a story? So it's more about how we want to communicate and what we want the audience to remember. Often we do want the audience to recognize the conclusion of the work that we're putting forward. So we will tell a story. We'll put a story within a scientific publication. We may, in our presentation to an audience, want to explain why we want to publish this work. What's the impact of the work? So storytelling is always going to be an important way to get your ideas across to the audience. So what about the structure of this story? So remember, at the end of the day, it's your story. But with every story, there's a need. That's usually a problem that needs to be solved. There's an impact to solving the problem. There's an impact of the problem. So we also have a solution, and we also need to communicate the benefits of that solution. Again, that's tied back to the impact. So let's first of all think, if we're communicating in science, about the need. Let's communicate on the need. Let's think about the problem or opportunity. Again, this is more of a summary of work that we've covered in previous videos, but there may also be an opportunity. So there may not always be a problem for us to solve. And in that case, we have to communicate what the opportunity is. And people get excited by opportunities. We want to grab the attention of the audience. So if we can build excitement for an opportunity, then we go get that attention from the audience. If it's a problem, we can talk about the pragmatic needs, but we can also talk, and we can stretch the heartstrings. We can talk about the personal needs and the real pathos reason to actually solve the problem or address the opportunity. We also need to think about the impact. So what happens if we address the problem or the opportunity? We have to ask ourselves these questions as we're trying to build the story, right? So why do we care? What's the priority? Why should the audience care, in fact? What's the urgency of solving this problem? And we've also talked before about this in previous videos. What will happen if we don't provide the solution? If we don't do A or B, what bad things will happen? So we've got to create the need in the eyes and the minds of the audience. However, sometimes we see the need and the audience may not see it immediately. So we have to work hard to make sure the audience follows us along and is particularly keen for us to demonstrate the solution to that problem. So what is the solution? Remember, this is your big idea. Tell the audience why it's different from other ideas that are out there. What makes your solution unique? And again, continue to state why the audience might care about your solution. Build the desire that will keep them engaged throughout the remainder of your presentation. State the benefit, and we can actually break down the benefit in 3 ways here. So there are features, advantages, and benefits. And I like to think about features perhaps associated with television. We might think about a 4K television. And when I first bought a 4K television, I did not know what 4K meant. It's a couple of numbers. I think we've also seen this when we're buying computers. What does it mean to have a certain processor speed? These are the features. This is how things work. The advantage, why 4K is better than HD. Why a higher processor speed is better than a lower processor speed. And that kind of ties into the real benefit. So again, when we're talking about advantages, we're comparing the features, but really the value to the person buying the television is that the image will be clearer. In the case of 4K, we can see a clearer screen. We can see higher definition images. With a processor speed, we might care about a processor speed because the computer will download images more quickly. It may compute chemical calculations more quickly and save you time at the end of the day. That's the benefit. So we have to put these features and advantages in context. We have to think about the big picture, which actually allows us to cycle back around to the key problem that we're trying to solve in the first place. We've talked about 50 words or fewer. We've talked about the idea of a power summary. This is important as you're building the story that you're trying to tell in your presentation. It's also important to have a 50 words or fewer power summary for an elevator conversation, right? So keep to the point. As you're preparing for your presentation, cut all the padding and make sure you get down to the core of your story. Remember to disrupt the status quo, disrupt the normal situation. People will then take notice when you put across the need. Describe the impact, state why your approach is different, and state the value of the conclusion. These are the 5 things that you should put into your power summary. Make sure this is clear first in the structure of your story before you develop the presentation. So we've spent some time talking about how to write with maximum impact. And again, I've used these ideas of clear, concise, and compelling. So let's just take a deeper dive into that for this summary video. Simplicity is critical. when things are clear, they are easy to understand. And we want things to be easy to understand for the audience. We realize that people don't have a lot of time. So when we're concise with our writing, when we're short and to the point, then we know that people will have enough time to read and take in what we want to tell them. What does compelling mean? I use this word a lot. It means that we grab attention. We might even say that our writing may be irresistible. What a compliment that would be if someone said that your writing was irresistible. So we've described all of these ideas previously in our presentations. What can we do to get more simplicity? We just proofread, we edit ruthlessly, round and round we go, and we scrap words, we pull words out, we keep things simple. So again, see the previous presentations on this topic. So that was writing, very quick summary there on writing. Let's get back to the key aspect of this presentation, which is indeed giving a presentation. And there are three steps that we're going to take when thinking about giving a presentation. We'll talk about the introduction step, we'll talk about the key topics, and we'll talk about the close for that presentation. Think about the headlines, think about the claims that you want to make. What's your big idea? Maybe even what's the title of your presentation? Think about the audience and how a headline would pizzazz that audience, even if it wasn't the formal title of the presentation that you gave as you're advertising your talk. But think about that headline that pizzazzes the audience. Make it clear, again, make it concise and compelling. Entice the audience. Maybe instead of saying a tutorial on how to create better communication for your target audience, which is quite a mouthful, maybe we can say presentations that never fail. Maybe that's the second slide of your presentation, knowing that in many cases we do have to put forward a formal title that ends up being more informative. But we can also play on words, we can provide something provocative, but we should get rid of any headlines that are boring, because again, we don't want to switch off the audience on the second slide. Think about your introduction. Who are you? What do you do? This is the credibility that you're going to put forward in your presentation. This is the ethos, if you will. Sometimes if you're giving a talk, an invited talk, an introduction would be provided. But even in that case, you can certainly add something that appeals to the audience, tells them about yourself, and allows you to kind of connect with the audience and also tell them something that supports your credibility. Why are you giving the presentation, and why is the audience coming to see you? In the introduction, as I've said before, provide an outline, tell them what you'll cover, tell them what you'll tell them. You may also choose to tell them how long it will take. If it's not a dedicated 50-minute presentation, and you have a pitch that you're trying to make to someone to support your work, tell them that you have a presentation that literally is 5 minutes long, and people will be more willing to commit their time to your presentation. Tell the audience as well how you intend to manage the questions. You may choose to answer questions as you go along to actually build some rapport with the audience, but you may also choose to take them at the end so that you maintain your flow throughout that presentation. Put forward the key topics in that introduction, right? So demonstrate your expertise. Make sure you talk about the issues that are important. You may describe your viewpoint. This is perhaps less important in the scientific presentation, but sometimes you can put forward a viewpoint, and again, that's helpful if you're putting forward a true pragmatic problem that needs to be solved. But again, here, try to grab the attention of the audience. This is always what we're trying to do. Make sure that they listen because you have something important to say. In the close of your presentation, summarize. Tell the audience what you've told them. You may also want to confirm that they agree with you. Maybe this is not so necessary in a science talk if you've made a logical, convincing case throughout. But you may, in a discussion form of presentation, you may also want to define the next steps. And this ends up being important perhaps in a sales presentation, or if you're building a collaboration, and who does what within that collaboration may be important at the end to discuss. And then, of course, show your acknowledgements, thank the audience for listening, and the important thing here is that you would close to an enthusiastic applause. So, how do you prepare your story? The big picture breakdown of this, the big ideas here are to break the story down into slide-sized chunks. So storyboard it. That's valuable to do. You certainly don't want to have too many ideas on one slide, because audiences find that chaotic, and it's harder for them to take key ideas forward onto the next slide. And we've talked about that previously. So let's think a little bit about creativity. We've talked about simplicity already. And we're going to talk about the hard work that we have to put in if we really want to make our presentation count. And these are all problems that we face as presenters. So no matter who it is, that hard work has to be put in, the creativity has to be there, and ultimately we want the simplicity because we want a message to be remembered by the audience. So critical, know your audience, put them first. Who are the audience? And remember, ask yourself why they are in the room. Why are they listening to you? What did they want to gain from your talk? Put them at the center of attention rather than yourself. What do they know already? Right? What's the assumed information? And why would they care? What's the desired outcome? Now, in this slide, this is about what you want to gain from the presentation. What are your expectations? Start writing your presentation with the end in mind. What do you want from it? What comes next? What are the action items? What would you like for your collaborator to do? What sale would you like to make? What idea would you like your audience to take forward? What perception of you do you want your audience to retain? So again, this always depends on the context and the situation you're in. Again, what does the audience want? What do you want? But you have to own the outcome before you start to write your talk. Think about your personal goal for your presentation. Let's think about style for a second, and we certainly don't want to bore the audience to sleep. So we've heard the term death by PowerPoint. There's some interesting videos on the internet to make you laugh about some of the ideas of death by PowerPoint. So let's skip through this very quickly, this slide, and talk about actual ways where we can improve the presentation. So we've talked about simplicity already. And I've mentioned that really this is the essence of clear communication. But at the same time, we don't want to dumb down the message. There's a fine balance here, but strip away those words that are less important, okay? We need to, as I said here, distill the story to the core, remove the superfluous words. Think about what's the purpose of any one slide. Right? If there's no purpose to the slide, take it out. What message or idea do we want to get across? Again, we begin with the end in mind. What do we want the audience to take away with them? Fewer words. Okay, how do we remove additional words? And often we might find, and we'll talk about this shortly, an image that actually better gets the point across. How can the audience focus more on you rather than the words on the page? Already this is a busy slide in this presentation. One idea per slide is important. Easily digestible chunks are important. In this slide, the importance here is simplicity and the steps that we can take to make each slide simple and take a single idea forward. So, the second of our 6 ways to improve our presentation is to remove clutter. So what is clutter? Clutter is anything that doesn't add value or make it easy to understand the presentation. Often people put company brands, headers and dates all over the page, and they can distract us from the key message. In principle, we're saying, do these things really get the audience excited about the message? Maybe the company brand or an important header needs to go into earlier slides, but not throughout the presentation because they distract. So keep each slide to all that you need to get your point across. The next thing to talk about is actually words in here. So we can all see in this image that there's a lot of words, but we don't need to read this image to perhaps recognize the form of the heart in here. And we'll come to image next slide in particular and how to find those images. But the important thing here is to recognize that images are better. Really, if we're putting a ton of words into a presentation, it ends up being a report. So we might as well just hand that report over to the audience. And sometimes the audience may prefer a report. If you're providing a thesis, then of course you have the words already in the thesis. So you may choose to focus on the images, on the graphs, on the data, and on the summaries, and on your particular explanation of those data to the audience. Bullets, main cause of death by PowerPoint. I probably have too many on this slide. We're going to cut those filler words, cut the jargon. We're going to make the words stand out and be memorable. Commit to using words sparingly and creatively. Do as I say, not as I do on this slide. And think about images. So let's jump into finding the right image. So find a visual metaphor for that idea that you want to get across. We've all seen that ideas could be represented by light bulbs, and that's a typical kind of standard boring metaphor for an idea that we've seen 1,000 times. Can you create your own light bulb? Can you find an image online that you're able to use legally to create your own light bulb? Can you actually take your own photo? That's easy with today's technology in order to create your own light bulb. Rather than use words, use an image. Another thing you can do, put the words in a thesaurus and find an image that pertains to that particular word, that particular synonym, this should say, for the word that you've put in the thesaurus. You may find cheap or free clip art. Be careful, sometimes these suggest amateur, but often we can find some good stuff out there. But it may be that you also may need to buy stock images, again, when that presentation really matters. Composition. So again, this is a way to improve your presentation. You'll notice here that I've broken up this slide into a 3x3 matrix. So this demonstrates the rule of thirds. Do we put something in the dead center? Or do we put it in the top right or the bottom left? What's best? Where do we put that image? How does it appeal to you? So in this particular case, you have to think like a photographer or an artist to do the best job with one of the presentations, to make your audience really stand up and take notice. So again, you have to put enough on the slide so that it makes sense to the audience. But you can also use white space effectively. You may not need to fill every part of the slide. And then sometimes there are images and words that actually go together, and you may want those images and words to actually be seen as a group, perhaps in one particular place on your slide. Don't forget, there's no real right or wrong answers in here, but the important thing that I'll mention time and again is that we should look at other people's work and see what works well, and not be afraid to borrow those ideas. We have to be careful with effects. Not too many of them. We don't want to give sensory overload, and you'll find that the novelty starts to wear off after a while. So keep it simple. Subtle dissolving in of words looks sophisticated. Another thought on effects is perhaps how we use the words and images. So we might put lines at the top of the page. So in this particular case, I have a line at the top of the page. It also makes sure that my slide doesn't get too cluttered. So you can use a theme to contain an image. You can use a particular template to help you build your presentation. Another idea here that I want to put across to you is to use a color. This is a red color. Where does it take us to on this slide? It takes us to the next word here, key text takeaway, and also to the bottom right hand corner of the presentation. So potentially that's another effect that can be used that doesn't really distract the audience too much or provide sensory overload. Often we might find there are too many bullets, so we want to keep these down to no more than 3. Once again, do as I say, not as I do. In this particular slide, the one idea I want to get across is some ideas for different effects, and some of these bullets here provide you some food for thought. So you may also choose to create your own template. Look around at templates that are available for you and choose the one that reflects the content and makes it easier for you to get your point across. If you're building your own template, make it easy to follow, make it consistent, and follow best practices from other templates that you've seen online or that come packaged with, for example, PowerPoint. Let's talk about delivery now. So we've talked about how we construct the slides. Let's think about how that PowerPoint presentation is really the vehicle that carries you towards the audience. So we have to think about how we deliver and how we perform, and really how we might shine or sparkle. So you've got your good design now, you've built your PowerPoint slides. How do you really build on that star quality? How do you make the work come alive? The most important thing if you are in the room with an audience is to be a presence. Be personable, come across as genuine, open, positive and upbeat. Remember, people want to see someone who's happy about the message that they're putting across. Bring other parts of your audience in the room. Something I've done is focus for a few minutes on the left-hand side of the audience and then switch over and walk and focus then on the right-hand side of the audience. That audience then feels that they're being brought in, they're being included in the conversation, and we might choose to switch backwards and forwards in order to demonstrate the presence. And lastly, smile, right? If you convincing your audience that you're happy to be there, then they will almost certainly enjoy having you, and it will add some positivity to their own experience of your presentation. My thoughts are that movement is useful. I use an advancer typically when I'm providing a presentation. If I'm stuck behind the podium, it's very static. So when I come out and walk around the room, it breaks down barriers. Of course, I do not want to overdo it. So I don't want to walk too far into people's space. So we can typically use the front of the room to walk backwards and forwards. This also ends up releasing some tension. And if we do it right, it establishes a rapport. But definitely don't invade other people's space. Make eye contact with people. Make friends with people in the room through that eye contact. Smile at people. Scan the room. Try to connect with different people at different times. Connect widely. And this is a skill, but it's pretty easy to look at people and to make that eye contact without deliberately staring at people. let's get this out of the way. I make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And we're all human. So that honesty and humility is going to be something that the audience will find quite positive. They will connect with you in a better way when you are honest and humble. Your credibility and trustworthiness goes up. You certainly should not lie. If you don't know an answer to a question, say that you don't know. And you can usually help the questioner by providing an offer to give them the answer at a later time. But certainly don't be pressured to give a wrong answer or lie. And again, if you can't provide an answer at that time, definitely defer. Practice, practice, practice. So the key here is to do it. Go through your work several times before you present it. You're going to find actual mistakes. You're going to find areas in your presentation that don't flow. You can do this, of course, on your own. You can also do it with a group. We've talked before in prior videos about getting feedback from a group. So once you've got that feedback, also ask your audience about whether you established a rapport. Did the audience feel engaged? Was it just a monologue? How did those slides resonate with the audience? You can also, of course, use video and audio these days very easily on a smartphone. Give yourself constructive criticism, but also ask the audience for that constructive criticism. That's going to help you put forward a better presentation. Very quickly, we'll talk about pace in here. Maybe not so quickly though. We don't want to go too fast or too slow. We sometimes may want to emphasize a point by slowing down and giving the audience time to digest what we're saying. Again, that practice is important. We also may want to speak more quietly. Sometimes that has the effect of gaining people's listening attention. People may tend to lean in and listen more when we quieten down. But we can also make emphasis by speaking up at times. Most importantly, speak clearly and think about the balance. Not too quick, not too fast, not too loud, not too quiet. What's your attitude? Enthusiasm is going to be infectious. So if you're enthusiastic about your work, the audience will be enthusiastic. Think about positive words of demeanor. And certainly you want to be measured and proportionate. Don't overstate things. Don't tell people your solution is better than it is. But certainly don't understate either. You want to be, as I say, measured and proportionate. And be motivated and sincere. Again, treat the audience with respect, which takes me to the next slide. Remember, you are the authority in the work that you're presenting. If you're presenting a thesis defense or a proposal, remember you're the authority in that room on that topic, not necessarily the audience. However, you have to respect the audience and give respect to the audience in order to earn their respect. But remember, always the good attributes: be open, approachable, fair, and honest, and you won't go too far wrong. Never try to discredit someone. You won't score any points by doing that. So when you build respect for the audience, when you demonstrate respect for the audience, it makes things much easier. And also, it's important to respect other people's views. Definitely do your homework. Make sure you know your topic before you come to give the presentation. So this is absolutely mandatory. This, of course, is going to build credibility and respect that you want to gain from the audience. When you know what you're talking about, it also boosts confidence. And of course, boosting confidence means that you can be more enthusiastic. You can focus more on your delivery. all right, especially when you know what you're talking about. When you know what you're talking about as well, this also actually believe it or not, develops trust. So really do your homework before you start your presentation, and don't rely on your advisor perhaps to get you out of trouble in a presentation on your research. How long should your talk be? So first of all, you want to be concise. You want to get to the point quickly. And you also want to remember, like we consider for TED Talks, that people's attention spans may be lost after 10 to 15 minutes. We may need to switch gears or build some change into your presentation. We certainly don't want to cram the content. If you can finish early, try to finish early. Remember, if you finish too early, you may get too many questions, and this might be a poor decision if you're giving a proposal seminar. So think about the length of the talk that you need it to be, perhaps about 1 slide per minute. Also, remember, as you continue to give more presentations in your life, think about the more senior someone is, the more things they've probably got to do, the more responsibilities that they have, and the less likely they'll want to stick around. So if you want to get a point across quickly, you'll need to get across a point quickly to those people who are senior in the organization. If you want something, keep things tight. And definitely, you always want to be thinking about establishing a connection with your audience as soon as possible. Engagement. Work hard to make connections. We've talked about eye contact, about walking through the room, establishing a rapport with the group. You may choose to encourage participation by asking questions of the audience during your presentation. Again, use your judgment, obtain constructive criticism, and practice. There is no right way, but you'll figure it out as you practice. You may also choose to ask the audience's point of view of something, and that also allows you to gain some engagement. So providing a summary in your closing slides is really important to converge and tie everything together. So let me just provide a summary as I close this presentation of what I've told you. So I've talked about how stories are particularly powerful. I've talked about the importance of a clear, concise, and compelling structure. Story design, how we build a solution around a problem. Presentation design, this is the 6 ideas that we went through to think about how to actually put our slides together. And we've also talked about delivery. How do we end a presentation? I always think the best way to end a presentation is with a thank you from your audience for listening. It signifies that the talk is over, and you can close to thunderous applause. So thank you for your time in listening to what I have to say about giving a presentation. Thank you so much for your attention.